Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Unified Deism on Blog Talk Radio, where you can follow the light of reasoned spirituality. Join us every other week as we explore belief based on reflective reason, personal experience, and observation of nature. Welcome again, everybody, to another episode of Unified Deism on Blog Talk Radio. Your co-hosts for this show are Dave Gaddis and Chuck Clendenin from the United Deism Foundation Council. Our featured guest for this week's show is Nick Dutch, well-known YouTube personality and self-described trans-deist. He's joining us from the UK. Other distinguished guests are Rob Reno, coming up out of Oklahoma, and I believe we have Spirit Seeker, a regular from down in Australia, where, as I understand, they've gone through a time change, and so it's 8 a.m. on Sunday morning. So the normal makeup of our audience spans 17 time zones, so we try to stick with this same time every week. There's only one ground rule, and that's the respect rule. So anybody, speak your mind. We do support free speech, but not mandatory listening, so please use respect when relating with your other callers. The host will do the same unless you become unruly or disrespectful, in which case you can expect us to protect the rights of those who are being respectful. If you want to dominate a topic, you can ask to be a featured guest or start your own show. Blog Talk Radio is free. So, this show works like any talk show. Hosts and guests will talk for a while about the show's topic, and then we'll open up the phone line for callers. Those who don't call in can pose questions in the chat room, and I see we have a few folks there. We have a hard stop at 1 hour. The more time we take for intro, the less time we have left over for the show. So let's go ahead and get started. So today's topic is a real treat. Nick Dutch bills himself as a trans-deist and a promoter of rational occultism. We've seen a lot of deists who blend deism with a number of other philosophies and religions. We've seen Christian deism, spiritual deism, and even pagan deism, if you've read Deist, So That's What I Am. But this is the first time I've seen deism mixed with the occult. So Nick has produced nearly 1,000 videos on YouTube under two different screen names or usernames. And so it's pretty hard to argue with Nick's popularity. He has over 800 friends under one of his personalities. Dave, you're a YouTube fan. I assume you're also a Nick Dutch fan. Why don't you give us a few of your thoughts before we start?
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. I am a Nick Dutch fan. I think I saw one of his first videos around April, and it was during a period I was researching some stuff on atheism, and I had searched on it and came across some of his videos, and I really like the way he brings, the experience side along with reason and logic to what he's looking at. And I think it's something that people will find very interesting as the show goes on. It was in May that he became part of the Unified Deism community on our website. And he also has since stood up a blog, nickdutch.unifieddeism.com. So he's really actually been very active, and I'm really excited to hear what he has to say today.
Well, it sounds great. And so with no further ado, Nick Dutch, welcome to Blog Talk Radio. Why don't you tell the folks a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hi there. My name's Nick Dutch. I work as a professional tarot reader, which is naturally billed as an entertainment service, and I think that's a very good way of seeing it. I had numerous strange experiences throughout my life, and I desperately tried to try and understand them. I moved into the New Age world in my late teens and early 20s, which I think is just one of those rites of passage that many people go through. But my search was a little, I guess, stronger, because I was trying to find out whether what the truth was behind the various strange experiences. But all I seemed to come up with is a wall of people who basically had strong beliefs and didn't really want to experiment or to try and analyze what they were experiencing or what they were talking about. I saw lots of people developing different religious themes. And this was during the 90s, when essentially the New Age world was becoming much more religion-orientated and much less spirituality-orientated. So there was an awful lot more charismatic evangelism for different denominations of paganism and treating spiritual beings in a very literalist manner. And that didn't quite work with me, because I was looking for answers. When I was in my early teens, I'd wanted to be an electronic engineer. So obviously you can tell my career has taken a bit of a departure in a completely different direction. And I still had that desire to try and use scientific reasoning. This led me into magic, which is regarded by some people as a science. I don't think that the word actually fits, to be quite honest. But it was definitely the start of a big journey for me. And I was drawn back into this a little later in life, and I carry on trying to apply real reasoning to strange experiences. And strange experiences is the best definition I can give you for what I've had. I mean, I've had anything from astral projection type experiences. I've seen ghosts, and I'll probably go into those in a greater detail later on down the line. But I'm still got questions. I don't feel I've got answers. And so therefore, when I came across the title Deist, that really started to resonate with me, because it allowed me to be able to ask questions and still to accept natural science.
Well, that's really interesting. I've watched some of your videos on YouTube as well, and I really like the way you're able to spontaneously communicate with a broad audience and share your experiences. Deism is based on reason, nature, and experience. I mean, if you look at any of the classical definitions of deism, those are the definitions that you'll find, or the ways that deism is described. And I have to mention, we are two countries divided by a common language. We tend to say deism here. I find deism a perfectly acceptable pronunciation as well, but some of the folks it just may go right past them. But how do you reconcile mysticism and the occult with reason and rationality? They seem pretty much mutually exclusive to a lot of deists.
Okay, well, I do also, as it were, believe in reason. I think that's a very important concept. But you also mentioned nature and experience. And then the next question is what we mean by nature and what we mean by experience. So by nature, I would say everything that can exist within the natural world, and that would include in the inner world as well as the emotional world, the perceptual world. And that goes with experience as well. I mean, if I have an experience of something, all I can do is write down or take a mental note of what I've experienced. I would take the assumption that if something happens, it would have to occur in accordance with the laws of nature somehow. And I would approach it from that point. As far as applying reason to these things, as occult experiences are few and far between, they're quite rare, they're very peculiar. We don't necessarily have all of the intellectual tools. We need to be able to break them down. So it's very difficult. I feel it's very correct to be skeptical about occult truth claims. Now, within the New Age world, there's not all that much of an attempt to try and break claims down and to try and work out what's really happening. So what I do is I say I have a strange experience. Okay, if I was to see a ghost, does that necessarily mean to say that there is life after death? I don't think we can make that leap. I can state that there is a certain experience that I've had which seems to have certain defining characteristics which one could, for convenience's sake, call seeing a ghost, for instance. Now, as far as mysticism, now the word mysticism means essentially two different things. Firstly, a state of mind brought about by religious practices, often associated with a concept or a symbol that is part of a complex system of symbols or representations of something, which could be anything. And secondly, it's a study of symbolism, and that can be done objectively and academically. Of course, the occult is like the third dimension, so to speak, and that covers what I call strange experiences. So,
Okay.
what I feel I can do is I feel I can draw weak beliefs, which are extrapolations to a certain degree, but I can't provide truth claims. There's a strong difference between a belief and a truth claim, as well as knowledge and facts. And I think that we have to understand that in its own right.
Well, I would agree with you, and I believe that deists certainly admit, and one of our principles of Unified Deism is that we believe that any of us is capable of having some sort of profound experience, whether that's God or a spirit or whatever, that we recognize that people can have revelations of any sort, but we tend to maintain a healthy skepticism and tend to think that the truth that can be found there is true for the person who had the experience and not necessarily true for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So tarot and ESP and Ouija boards can be a lot of fun at a party as entertainment. How do you, these seem to be a serious part of your life, not just for fun. How does deism fit in the same box with tarot cards?
Well, that's a very good question. The way I understand it, deism or deism is essentially reason-based. Now, no matter what, I've got to challenge my own understanding of what I'm doing or experiencing and to work out what I'm trying to achieve and on what particular level, so to speak, I'm trying to achieve it. Now, whether, a tarot spread falls randomly or not, it doesn't really matter to me. If they tell a story and that story can help me to think about life in a different way, then that can be either useful or just done for fun and entertainment when there's nothing on television. If during a commercial tarot reading something pops into my head and I tell the client what it was, and then they then explain to me that it seems to relate directly to something that's happened to them on that day, then, at times, but not all the time, it is rational to assume that there's a possible hypothetical connection, depending upon, the qualitative features of the experience. But what that is, how it works, what its limitations are, basically we can't say. So again, we can't really apply a truth claim. Also, the tarot is much more than just a tool for fortune telling. The tarot has been used to illustrate many things, such as the path of an individual going through the process of growing up, ideas from Christian religious traditions, for instance, perceiving the Empress or the High Priestess as representations of Mary, for example. The whole tarot deck being symbolic of happenings in a person's life. So it could be a form of symbolic mysticism that one can study academically, just as one might read like a well-written book of fiction and get some reflection upon one's own life that way. It's also possible to use these symbols as part of your own personal religious or spiritual activities such as meditation. Now, you mentioned ESP as well. If I was to attempt to, for instance, deliberately share a dream with someone on the same night, attempting to use the technique which came out of astral projection, and then I get some unprompted feedback from that individual about the dream that they had one night, then again, there's a possibility, if there is a strong correlation between what was sent and what was received, that there is something, something going on there, but precisely, again, what it is, we can't say. Now, as far as Ouija boards are concerned, I'm sure you've heard this before. People say things like, it's just the ideomotor effect making the planchette move. Well, okay, well, that's great. If it is just the ideomotor effect, why aren't, like, the atheists and free thinkers and people who claim to know themselves playing around with the Ouija board to find out what ideos or ideas are actually lurking inside their own head? This is quite an important question. And if you do a more, shall we say, in-depth Ouija board session, and something comes out which seems to have a possible correlation with things in the outer world, then maybe there's a justification to develop some form of belief, not necessarily a truth claim, but a belief. I mean, I would say that it's the quality of analysis you apply to these things that really matters rather than necessarily what happens. You don't want to end up cowering in fear in the corner of the room, terrified of a piece of plasterboard with a few letters and numbers on it. That would naturally be irrational and might interfere with the normal course of your secular life. So, precisely what happens, precisely what is the evidence that we collect as people who are experimental occultists? Well, we don't really know, but we can feel justified to generate weak beliefs and desire to experiment and explore.
Well, it sounds like a lot of fun. Let me get to the phone and see if, for instance, if Rob has any questions for Nick.
Am I on?
You are.
Okay. Hi, Nick. My name is Rob. I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma. My daughter happens to be engaged to someone who lives in Dawlish in South England, so I guess I'm going to have to learn how to pronounce deism when I get over there to visit. But anyway, I'm what's called a scientific deist, and I believe that everything can ultimately be explained. You said that you also believe in reason as well as the occult. Do you have any theories that you could expound upon to help us understand how occultism and reason can come together to explain these phenomena?
Well, I think it depends upon how you apply the scientific method. For instance, if you were to set up a personal experience or to choose to try and generate a personal experience, such as I mentioned, trying to share dreams with people, you would need to work out under what circumstances you can get information from the person you try to share the dream with, that they can provide some feedback to you in an unprompted manner that would allow you to think maybe there's something happening there. A lot of people who are New Agers get too heavily emotionally involved in the beliefs that they develop. I think that this is a block, and I think that this is an obstacle which stops people from trying to understand more. My personal experiences suggest that it depends upon your state of mind. And if you can learn more about how to control your state of mind, you're probably more likely to get a particular result. But these things are not 100% reliable, and that's where a lot of the problems come in. I'm sure you've heard of James Randi.
Oh, yeah.
And he's dedicated a large chunk of his career to debunking the claims of psychics. But what he hasn't done is to totally disprove the phenomena. There may be a force at work. We don't know what it is because it doesn't seem to operate upon the standard natural lines of electromagnetism, for instance, and, ideas about telepathy don't follow the standard patterns. So we would just have to work out what types of experiences we can generate for ourselves and see this as being experiential and experimental and more of an art form rather than necessarily something that's there to provide concrete, hard, and fast results.
Do you have, do you think that quantum mechanics may play a role in this? Now, I know a lot of people are critical of that point of view, but I try to keep an open mind about everything, because I'll tell you right up front, I don't know. You know, that's my starting point. I don't know. I got opinions about things. But
well, yeah. I mean, I think I see where you're coming from there. I suppose hypothetically there is a possibility of there being some kind of quantum entanglement connection. But what that is, we don't know. And I think we've got to be bold enough to be able to say, I don't know, which, again, a lot of people don't do. And those who are within the New Age world who use the word quantum a lot state this as if it's like an article of dogma, which I also object to. Although, hypothetically, in terms of physical science, it might actually be the case, and it might actually, quantum physics might actually be able to explain something, but not necessarily to the degree that a scientist, as it were, a proper scientist, might need if they wanted to create a proper scientific thesis on forms of psychic phenomena. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry if I could ask a question, Dave. So, Nick, there's a TV show that I like to call Medium, and it's about a lady who has some connection or ability to see or speak with the dead, and it's actually based on a real person who's helped in a lot of police cases, murder cases, kidnappings, and stuff like that, with apparently a fairly high success rate, enough that ended up landing that story a TV show. Have you had any experiences like that have, related, in the strange experiences you've discussed, that have actually been true or come true or foretold anything, or have they just been more of, an experience with nothing additional beyond that?
Well, in my teenage years, I used to get prophetic visions that were just like a camcorder recording about 15 minutes worth of time and playing it back to me about 5 nights before. It would be as if the camcorder was behind my eyes in real life. It would take the 15 minutes worth of time and play it back to me 5 nights before. And it would be clear as crystal, just the same. I couldn't change anything. So, yes, things of that quality can occur, but it's just a question of trying to work out what these things mean. That's the issue, and that's probably the issue with prophetic visions. There was a time when I went on a holiday with an 1830 crowd, and when I went for a sleep in the afternoon, I passed out and I got the vision of an angel saying to me, there is a terrifying male presence around you. And I thought, what's that all about? And I came out of my meditation, and it turned out that someone was vandalizing my car. So whether that was connected, basically, I don't know. But these type of things do still happen. There was, and this is a slightly different type of experience, but I was going to go and see a friend of mine who I knew had some variety of psychiatric problem. But before I went to see him, I tried visualizing 5 points of a 5-pointed star in front of my face, drawn in lines of white light. I realized that I couldn't visualize all 5 points perfectly. There were 2 points that I couldn't quite get right. But I thought nothing of it. I got straight on my motorcycle, and I drove like 15 miles to go and see my friend. The moment I put my head round his bedroom door, the first thing he said to me was, I can see 3 points of a 5-pointed star on your face. He didn't even say hello, he just come out with that line. Which again makes me realize that there's something happening here, and it's weird.
I think that that's one good question. Others too, but one of the things you had mentioned, I think you sort of alluded to it earlier, and in some of your videos, you talk about religious practices, nuns that are constantly praying, and that being, akin in some ways to meditation and some of the other things that that maybe occultists practice that bring on this additional personal experience of God or whatever, something supernatural. What are your thoughts on that?
Mind-altering practices are performed all around the world and in every single religion. With the average individual who goes to church on Sunday and comes back home and maybe says their prayers kneeling beside their bed for about 30 seconds and then gets some sleep, probably is not altering their mind all that much. The repetition of words, the repetition of a mantra, if you've got a reasonably constrained posture, can have an effect upon the brain. I can't give you a link to the study right now, but I did read the fact that if you do meditation for a period of time every single day for 90 days, there is a change in the brain. The physical structure of the brain changes, and this is called neuroplasticity, and new brain pathways develop, and that's called neurogenesis. This comes from natural science. It's not just purely from the New Ages. It's really from natural science. And so a lot of religious exercises done over time will change your brain and therefore the way it works and what you're capable of experiencing. I myself have investigated through personal experience prayer quite a lot, and it was only a certain number of months ago when I was experimenting with one particular prayer through repetition. And on, I think it was the fourth night of me doing it, I did the prayer continually for at least 20 minutes. Something which looked like a being suddenly appeared in front of me, a man about 7 foot tall, a three-dimensional black shadow just appeared and then disappeared. Of course, what that means, I can't say. But the fact I do a lot of prayer and a lot of meditation as well as chakra opening exercises, as people call them, that I assume has some extra ability to create the apparent results.
So do you feel that is created inside your own mind, or do you actually feel that is something supernatural that you're experiencing? Have you made up your mind on that? I mean, maybe you don't even know, but I'm just curious.
Well, I mean, no, I don't actually know. But if it happens in the universe, my opinion would be that it is natural, but it's just not very well understood because we don't really have some philosophical structure to be able to successfully analyze this particular type of phenomenon. When I've been asked to do a spiritual healing exercise on somebody, I could do a visualization of, let's say, the healing energy going down my arms, out of my hands, into their body, and then down their arm. And I get people reporting that they can feel warmth or electricity moving through their body in the way that I'm visualizing it, without me telling them what I'm visualizing, which makes me feel that there is another component. What that component is, again, that's a massive algebraical letter X. Is the unknown.
Yep.
Definitely. Nick, you bill yourself as a trans-deist. For folks who have not had a chance to experience your blog yet, and I suggest that they do, by the way, just go to the homepage of www.unifieddeism.com and click on blogs there and grab yourself an experience and read the Nick Dutch blog. But could you talk about what a trans-deist is?
Yes, certainly. I came across the term when I was looking through different types of deism, or deism, sorry. And there was, of course, spiritual deism, there was pan-deism, and then, of course, there was pan-endeism, which was rather interesting because the God model of the universe within pan-endeism was rather curious. And there was an idea that there was trans-deism, which was the actions of a pan-endeist, which involves possibly prayer, meditation, and other things. But I thought to myself, what best defines myself? Is it the model of the universe, or the model of the apparently theological universe that I've got, or is it the actions that I do? And I think in my case, as I'm going to be applying my reasoning to my experiences in different ways, I'm probably going to be developing different points of view as to what the God concept is. So I thought I'd define myself by the actions, and I regard this as being experiential mysticism, namely meditation, prayer, and other forms of essentially occultic or religious exercises for the purposes of changing the mind to aspire to have different forms of strange experience.
Interesting. I've been been reading a book lately. I picked it up at the library last weekend, and I've started going through it. It's called Dancing with the Sacred, Evolution, Ecology, and God. It's written by a gentleman by the name of Carl E. Peters. But I thought a little bit about both panentheism and transdeism as I've been reading this, because he started to think of God as not a being, but rather a process. Basically, that God is the creative and evolutionary process that whereas a pandeist thinks that nature and God are the same, he is basically saying that the process of evolution and God are the same thing, that the creative and transformational process at work in the universe is a better way to think of God. That kind of meshes with transdeism a little bit. What are your thoughts about that particular notion?
Well, I think that's an interesting idea by analogy, but I don't think that it necessarily encaptures what I do, because I'm focusing on certain forms of action. I mean, the God concept that I use actually overlaps more with traditional religion. I call God the creator and master of the universe, not because I believe that God created the universe, nor that he is the master of the universe, but because those are titles which are awe-inspiring, mind-blowing. And as such, that helps me to, through autosuggestion, I guess, become closer to that transcendental spiritual state of mind that I'm looking for. As far as, is God the creative process of the universe? That I don't know. If I was more of an atheistic individual, I would say that natural things happen, and those are the natural processes of the universe, and there's no need for a God concept. But with all of my personal strange experiences, I've come more to the belief in the possibility of a complex, omnipresent, global, or possibly even universal consciousness, within which there are lots of little consciousnesses of which we are possibly a part.
That is a very interesting concept. My oldest son dated a girl who actually worked on the psychic hotline for a while, and that relationship, frankly, didn't last very long. But do you believe that psychic phenomena are real? And I think I know the answer to that. I know that you need to position what you do as entertainment. What's the balance there? What's the how much of that is real? How much of that is really a form of entertainment?
Well, I think that's quite difficult to say. I mean, for ethical reasons, all forms of commercial readings, whether they're whether they are medium readings, tarot readings, whatever, they should all be seen as entertainment for common sense ethical reasons. However, strange experiences do happen occasionally during a commercial reading. For instance, once upon a time I was doing a reading for a lady over the telephone. Suddenly something popped into my head. It was one of those brass plates you put on a door, which you push on to open it, okay? It was a brass hand plate. And I saw it come through very clearly, and I could describe the brass edging to it, the patterning on it, and I told my client what I saw. And she then related back to me that that was something that she fitted on her front door earlier on that morning. So occasionally within a commercial reading, strange things do happen. Where the balance lies, it's difficult to say. As far as what I do in my work, to the most part, I'm there to provide a service to the customer, which can be to provide confidence. It can be there to just discuss a few issues. Many readings are, in fact, just a conversation between the customer and someone the customer is not going to bump into, is not a member of the customer's family, is not a member of the customer's friendship circle, is not someone who works in the same company as the customer. Okay, so it's a confidential conversation service which could be used therapeutically. And as such, I would consider myself to be a form of amateur therapist to a certain degree. But strange things can happen during readings, and I can do a reading, I have no idea what's going to come out, and sometimes something appears in the reading which I then say to the customer, which is not the sort of thing I would normally say, and hey presto, it resonates very well with them. So I think that there's a lot of question marks about that. Not bad question marks, it's essentially just more questions have to be asked. I mean, sometimes the more you know, the more you realize the less you know, and the more questions you've got.
Very interesting. You talked about the word mysticism, and you gave two different definitions for mysticism. When it comes to deism, in the book Deist, so that's what I am, I put an entry in there on the stages of spiritual development that were described by a gentleman by the name of M. Scott Peck. He's a psychiatrist who wrote in the 90s, I think, primarily, and he described 4 stages of human spiritual development. Stage 1 is, chaotic, disordered, reckless. Young children are in stage 1, and some people never get out of stage 1. They tend to be defiant and disobedient and don't like answering to any authority. Well, that could certainly describe some deists, but some people never progress out of stage 1. And stage 2 is more where this is more the religious stage where people have blind faith and trust. And then stage 3, I believe, would describe a lot of deists, and that is the stage of scientific skepticism, inquisitiveness, and stage 3 people don't tend to accept things on faith, but they have to be convinced logically. A lot of people working in scientific and technological research are stage 3. I think I know Rob Reno well enough to say that I think Rob Reno is solidly in stage 3 but then he describes stage 4 as the stage where an individual starts enjoying the mystery and the beauty of nature while retaining skepticism. Someone at stage 4 starts perceiving patterns in nature, and so a stage 4 person his religiousness and spirituality begins to differ quite a bit. Doesn't accept blind faith, but actually starts to have genuine belief. That's not necessarily based on absolute proof, but a sense of real belief. And so he describes stage 4 people as mystics. Given this, do you think that's a fairly good description of the stages of spirituality that a trans-deist would proceed through, or is it? Do you are there stages that you don't feel that a transdeist would pass through, and do you think that's a description of a mystic that would fit a transdeist?
I think that's very difficult to say, and I think that would have to be a personal choice. From what you've described there, I find it quite interesting that the author has created a pattern and has said that the final stage is to be able to recognize patterns. So maybe he is perceiving himself as being in stage 4. My impression is that there's different levels of mysticism, and it's quite difficult to define. I mean, I try and put it into just a couple of different categories. Number one is the more analytical, more contemplative aspect, and the second one is trying to get a more intimate relationship with a symbol through applying some variety of meditative or prayerfulness associated with it. For instance, someone who kneels in front of the crucifix and prays to Jesus Christ, and they visualize the crucifix, and they think about it, and they feel it inside them, and eventually they may have a mystical union with that particular symbol. That is the same kind of thing that I would say a transdeist could do, but with nearly any symbol on the face of the planet, so long as there is some variety of important message associated with that the transdeist might want to play around with. Do I consider myself to be in stage 4? I think I oscillate between all stages 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Do you think that symbols are necessary, or do you think that some people may be able to get beyond symbolism?
Well, even if you're getting beyond symbolism, you can't escape symbols. Let's say you were meditating on the most supreme, most abstract God concept you could in the whole history of humanity, okay? That would still be a symbol.
You just internalized it.
It's just a different variety of symbol. I mean, you could have a literal symbol like a runic letter or a tarot card. You could have a symbol which is a sound. You can meditate on a sound and try and develop a feeling of unity with that sound. You can have color as a symbol. You can have a thought, a feeling, a mood.
I'm sorry. Do you see any connection or commonality between the different symbols that are found in different cultures of the world?
Well, being someone who lives in the United Kingdom, I would say I probably have a biased perspective because a lot of our culture has been very heavily dominated by Christianity. And as such, I tend to see similarities between some Christian ideas and some ideas in other cultures. But I also feel that the cultures are trying to answer in a simple manner some of the similar mysteries, the mysteries of nature, the seasons, harvest, seed time, and also the cycles of life, birth, life, death, and the possibility of resurrection and reincarnation afterwards. And so, I think that there is a strong commonality between the monotheistic faiths, the pagan faiths, and that goes around the world. And even the more transcendental ideas, I feel that there is a strong correlation. If you separate the literalism and you see things in an allegorical manner. I mentioned in one of my blogs that Gnostics don't necessarily literally worship the sun, but they see the sun as being a representation of what God could be. Namely, it sits in the center of our solar system, regulating the passage of our seasons and of our days, and it gives us freely its energy. And as such, is it therefore a representation of something that God could hypothetically be?
It's interesting that you brought up the Gnostic thing, and I was just going to read it's a short paragraph here, but I was looking up some of the stuff about the Gnostic view of Jesus. And, we have a Christian deism piece, so I'd be interested in your thoughts on this. And then if anybody in the group considers themselves a Christian deist, where they would fall out on this. Here's the quote. The message of Jesus needs to be seen in the context of a man locked within the prison of his own creation. To interpret Jesus as some sort of sacrifice demanded by a deranged homicidal Jehovah says more about the mental state of modern man than about the real message of Christianity. The role of Jesus is that of a light being who comes from the treasury of light to reveal the truth about the material plane. Jesus comes as a revealer, a bringer of gnosis, an opener of doors. He works to shatter the prison that locks the true self into the body and awaken the light which is hidden within the heart of man. He comes as an emissary from a faraway God, not the false God of creation, the screaming, demanding, arrogant Lord of matter, but the true God, the unrevealable, unmarked, ageless, unproclaimed Father. That's from the Gospel of the Egyptians. But so, what is your thoughts on Gnosticism relative to what or who Jesus was? And then if there's any Christian deists online, what are their thoughts?
Well, that's an absolutely amazing and very beautiful quotation, and I think it does sum up a strong interpretation as to what Jesus Christ could actually be about. You said within the quotation that Jesus is coming to bring gnosis, but it does depend upon what you mean by the word gnosis. The understanding that I have is a sense of knowledge, which could be the allegorical knowledge, the divine knowledge, or it could be actually the state of mind. Within occultism, the word gnosis means that sense of unity with a symbol or an idea, which I interpret as being the state of mind of prayer. So for Jesus to give gnosis, Jesus is therefore giving us the ability to be able to understand in a greater level, and therefore to be able to let go absolutely, and to be able to somehow have contact or communication with this God concept. I feel it's a very complex symbol. I also personally perceive the crucifixion of Jesus Christ as being a sense of giving up a part of your own being to move on to something better, such as growing up, overcoming an obstacle, giving up a bad habit, and so on and so forth.
Interesting, very. I read a book on Gnosticism, last year sometime. I just was absolutely fascinated by it. The Gnostics, they look at the same thing that Christians do, and they see something completely different. You noted that there's the notion of what Dave read about the false creator God, and the Gnostics tend to think of Jehovah, the Jewish or Old Christian Old Testament God, as the creator God, but not the true God. The true God never created anything. He emanated the material from which the creator God created things. So he created basically darkness and light, which matter and energy. And he didn't create it, but rather emanated it from his being. And the creator God used that to make things, to create things. But fascinating things, and there are many, many different branches of Gnosticism. I strongly recommend that people check it out. There are some fascinating beliefs there.
I think that's something that I like in what you're saying, and I'll give it back to you, Nick, if you had another thing to add. But you talked about the Lord of Matter in that quote or something, but I sometimes, at least in my own mind, perhaps wrongly so, but put atheists in that box where they're just totally beholden to what they see in matter and what only the scientific method can prove, and only what they can observe, and they sort of discount all this other strange stuff that happens that that Nick is mentioning.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. They often come out with the quotation, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. But essentially, at what point is something an extraordinary claim? That is a subjective statement, and it's not a scientific statement. Essentially, if something happens in the natural world, then basically It happens in the natural world. What it means we still can't say yet. Maybe not in my lifetime, but maybe in 10 centuries' time we'll have a better understanding of what this type of phenomenon is really about. But we've got to basically move forward and not stick to rigid paradigms. Although there's been a lot of understanding from neuroscience that different parts of the brain seem to be responsible for different things, that doesn't necessarily say that we understand, fully and completely understand, the mechanism of consciousness.
I don't think that we can necessarily nail down all of what consciousness is. The theories that were put forth by my mind is going to go blank on me here. Christian Deist, who just sent us a nice long blog post, Dave. For some reason, my mind is blanking.
I know you're talking about. I was also on the Spiritual Deism Yahoo group that you sent out recently, Chuck, too, and they had a long post on the same topic. And I thought it was really it's an interesting thing, the hard problem of consciousness, as they call it. And in that group, they were kind of saying scientists wish that wasn't an issue. It would go away because they can talk about how the brain, certain parts light up or are triggered by certain memories or where certain bodily functions are controlled, but they cannot answer why we have an inner life, an inner experience. I think you called it an inner world or inner perception, Nick, when you were doing some of your dialogue.
There's much more. Obviously, there's much more to life and awareness, consciousness. It's not something that you can absolutely that you can show. Here's the piece of the brain that describes consciousness. There's still a lot of mystery to all of that. I want to let people know that we are getting down towards the end here. We have around 7 minutes and something remaining. I do want to give folks a chance in the chat room to ask their questions. I know that Pete Hilbig had popped in earlier. I didn't get a chance to recognize him as one of our distinguished guests. Pete is, whom everybody knows as Dad, is in the chat room from Australia. He did ask Nick where in England you live. He was, I'm going to butcher this, a Bristolian, somebody who lived in Bristol, I guess, for 20 years.
Yeah, I'm in the South Midlands in a beautiful city location. I'll say that much for now.
Okay, good enough. I guess for someone who has lived there or at least visited there, that's descriptive enough to give you an idea of where you are. I know that you referred to it as London time. So the Greenwich Mean Time, Dave's 1 hour ahead of you. But I wanted to cover quickly just a couple more questions before we wrap up. You've posted nearly 1,000 videos on YouTube. Where in the world do you find the time to post that many videos?
Well, that's also a very good question. What I don't have the time to do is to do thousands of text blogs, because that takes much more in the way of preparation. Instead, it's just much easier to set the camera up and just rant until my heart's content and spend the rest of the day editing the video rather than just typing everything up letter by letter.
So you're very visually oriented. I tend to be the other way around. I've done some videos. I had a great time doing them. I'm going to do some more, but I'm much more inclined to write and edit.
And I think you need to do a lot more.
So I see that a new caller has joined us, too, from the 757 area code. So I wanted to say hello and welcome and see in the last few minutes remaining here whether or not our new caller has any questions for Nick Dutch.
Yes, this is Mario 1.
Hello. Hi there.
Welcome.
Welcome back. Sorry you didn't join us earlier. We've been having a good time.
Okay,
yes,
what's your question?
I
You
just
can
had
go ahead.
A quick comment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had a quick comment. You hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Yes. Wanted to talk about just Nick in the conventional sense. Errol Doherty has talked about some things about the Jesus puzzle in the God Who Wasn't There video. Not the short version, but the longer version where Doherty talks with Brian Fleming, where he talks about Jesus from a Gnostic sense, or Paul's vision of Jesus from being not of earth, but of some other sphere.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Maxwell, I think, has many excellent videos where he talks about astrotheology, which talks about Jesus from the same standpoint, and Nick from the same standpoint. And I also believe, finally, it's documented in the Zeitgeist movie by Peter Joseph. Acaria S. has several excellent videos on Google where she talks about the sons of God, the greatest story ever told. I think it presents very good, I think, semi-factual information about the fact that a lot of this stuff is just pure myth. And that's really all I wanted to say.
It's funny because I just watched that 3-part series, the Zeitgeist series, a couple weeks ago, and it was really interesting, and I thought they made some pretty compelling arguments for how all of this stuff since, the early Egyptians and the ties between, later Christianity and Judaism and a lot of the different stuff, how it's all merged together. It's really cool.
The Zeitgeist stories have unfortunately been very heavily debunked. So I don't think we can say that there's quite that much truth to them, but I'm sure that some mythology does get passed on from one religion to another with the passage of time. I think we could probably say that. But the other thing I would say is that sometimes myth can be important, it can be spiritual, and it can be powerful.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And go ahead, I know we're getting to the last second here.
Yeah, we are. That sounds like an interesting discussion for a future show. So I did want to mention a couple of things real quickly here. We're down to about a minute remaining. I want to repeat that Nick has a blog on Unified Deism. So if you go to the homepage and click on blogs, you'll find his blog. It's nickdutch.unifieddeism.com.
Mm-hmm.
I also wanted to mention that all of our video and radio broadcasts are being archived at deism.tv. We own that domain name. And that we have a really exciting video coming up. I dumped it on Dave, and we have a 5-part interview with John Lindell that's going to be coming out very shortly. So, Nick, I want to thank you for joining us. It's been a fascinating time, and I hope that we get to watch and read a lot more of your stuff as we go on through time. Thanks again for joining us.
Not a problem. Enjoyed every minute of it.
Yeah, thanks,
Great.
Nick.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you for sharing your time with us for this episode of Unified Deism on Blog Talk Radio. Join us again in 2 weeks when we will again explore belief based on reflective reason, personal experience, and observation of nature.